So the snare you just heard in this little piece of intro music is the one that I created using Arturia Pigments. You can also use another synth such as Massive to get similar results, but in the end it's all a matter of personal preference, and just, you know, try to be original. Don't copy everything I do unless that's just what you want to do. Anyway, why don't we just get started? Let's take a listen to our snare shell. And this is our noise tail. And together they sound like this. So let me show you this. It are two instances of pigments, as you can see right here. So let's look at the synth section first. I use engine analog and I use 3 different oscillators. You can just see the configuration right here. And then the most important part are the envelopes. So our VCA, are around 250 milliseconds, something like that. Now let's just loop this section. Something else I did is, if you look at the tuning right here, master tuning, I'm using envelope number 2 to actually make the pitch go down really quickly. If I turn this up, kind of get the point. If I change the decay a little bit, this is a typical way of creating a snare sound. The decay curve as well, to make it really snappy and short. And I also used envelope number 3 to actually modify our filter. And as you can see, the filter goes it cuts off the high frequencies really fast. Something like this. And now let's look at the effects section. Oh, and also, before I forget this, I also modified oscillator 3 a little bit with envelope number 2 as well. This is without. Let's just disable this part and look at the utility engine right now. This already gives us a small tail, but it's not the tail I'm looking for right now, but it just gives it a bit more of an, you know, attack and aggressive sound together with the rest of. Because if I disable it, it's a lot drier. So I like this one more. It sounds more like a snare drum with the snares underneath it. You know, the bottom of the snare. Just a subtle change, nothing special. Now let's look at the effects applied. You can just copy all the settings. Make sure the dry width is at the same amount. Let's just listen to the bit crusher first. Reverb. Just a very small amount. And the distortion. all the way up. And that's our basic snare shell sound. Now I also applied some external effects as well. Let's look at these. Let's listen to our EQ. With EQ, without. Then Fab Filter Saturn to get some without. It gives the whole snare more of a room sound in the back, distorted room sound. And last but not least, our compressor, which sounds like this. Disabled, it sounds like this. Enabled. So it makes it snappier and shorter. Now that's our snare shell. Now let's look at the noise tail. All right, let's loop this. Again, let's look at the synth first. Utility engine, noise carrier 1 and 2. Some filtering, high pass. Now the envelopes, I used something similar. As you can see, envelope number 3, just a very small amount. To get some brightness going on, that goes down really quickly. The tuning right here, envelope number 2 for this one. Just a subtle amount. The thing is, I really like the high frequencies and I also hate them. So I just like a fresh, bright sound, but I want it to go down really quickly, if that makes sense. So that's why I did this whole cutoff, filter modification, and also the tuning. So it's just the start of the snare sound is really bright, and then I want it to go down. Yeah. Okay, now let's look at the effects. Let's just disable them. Didn't use this one. Macros. I think I used this on the dry wet amount of the delay and reverb. Yeah. So now let's look at our external effects, just some EQing. Without and with. So all of this together sounds like this. Let's turn down the external effects and show you the difference. So you might think, yeah, but it sounds punchier and more bass heavy without all these external plugins. Yeah, that's right, but in the end, in a mix, you really want to cut down as much stuff that's not needed, so, and also compress the sound a little bit. Sometimes less is more and it gives a better sound in the end. So then the next step I did was send them to a bus. So I made this one. So I audio sent the snare shell to this bus and this noise tail as well. Just a small amount more than the snare shell, as you can see. And this basically means that we are going to apply some effects, but also still hear our original sound. See the volume right here. So we are applying some more effects and it sounds like this without. Makes the tail really juicy, you know, and I'm sure you like juicy. Quadra fuzz, just a way of distorting things. And then I use G-clip. You can just copy the settings, but you know, you can actually use any sort of distortion plugin and just mess around with it so everything starts sounding juicy. Actually, this was one of the presets and I just modified it a little bit, so really like the sound. I'm not sure if I can show you how it sounds without these two. Normally I should be able to. Maybe let's just turn up the volume of this one. So it sounds really dirty, you know. And then the next step is I did like a mix down of this snare sound, and I just took the best sounding one, because if you listen carefully they all sound a little bit different. So I just took one of the better sounding ones and then I actually copied it twice. Let's just give this a color. So again, these samples are a mix down of this and the brutal buzz together, and then we get these samples. And then I just copied them. I made this one a little bit shorter. I also dragged this thing right here so it sounds a bit shorter. Let's disable the effects for now. So it sounds like this. And the other one is a little bit longer, so it will sound like this. And a bit louder as well. Now let's start with this one first. What I did was I used a transient plugin, and this makes the snare sound, you know, the body more upfront. Because if I turn this down, this is more like a without. If I bring this up, it's you need to find a balance between the whole body of the snare and the tail. So sometimes you just hear this really small poppy snare drums with a very long tail, and I don't really like that. I want both. I want a nice tail and a fat sounding snare shell. So that's why transients can be really helpful, you know. Duration 180 and release 150, so that's quite long actually. And then let's look at the other one, the shorter one, which sounds like this without the plugins. Then I used an amp simulator. This one is, I think it's a stock plugin from Cubase, and I made it sound like this. And then I used some more EQ. Without, with. And this is to actually bring some more of a warm mid sound to the snare, because this is how it sounds without the amp sim sample we used. Now I'm going to turn it on. Also keep in mind, I almost forgot to mention this, but I actually reversed the phase of this one. So if I bring it back to normal, it sounds like this. So just, you know, sometimes copying samples, doing some other stuff with it, and reversing the phase can have really cool results. So let's do this again. Really brings up those warm mids. If I turn it up a bit more, that's a bit too dark for my taste, but you know, it sounds really cool, of course. Maybe, let's say, -8 can work as well. So yeah, I think the sweet spot is -13. And there you go. Now let's look at this. Then I, you know, mix down. I did another mix down of these samples as well, and this is the end result. And I also did like a small cutting the tail a little bit to make the samples a little bit smaller. And that's the end result actually. Maybe I can normalize this so I can really show you how it sounds on high volume. Okay, so that's it for this snare tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment if you have any questions. I will try to answer all of your questions. And of course, I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.